Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, every week bringing you outstanding professional communication leaders. And today we have a truly special guest. A few years ago, I reviewed a couple of books on Amazon. One of them, Innovative Presentations for Dummies. And then the second one, Killer Presentations with Your iPad. Much to my delight and amazement, the author, Ray Anthony, was gracious enough to give me a phone call after that, and we got acquainted as a result of that and have been in touch ever since. I'm so happy to have Ray join us today. Ray heads the Anthony Innovation Group in Woodlands, Texas, in the Houston, Texas area. He is truly world-renowned as a communication expert. And so we are very happy to welcome him today. Ray Anthony, happy to have you with us on the Biz Communication Show.
Bill, it's a real pleasure being here with you.
One of the key questions, I believe, that will help us begin to grasp what you offer to professional people, one of the key questions, Ray, is how have audiences changed in the last 20 years? How have they changed in their composition? How have they changed in their expectations? How have they changed in the way they want a speaker, presenter to address them?
What a great question, Bill. If you take a look at it, we go back 20, 30, perhaps even 40 years ago, most speeches or presentations were very, very formal. And people wore a three-piece suit, and they had a script, and they were basically talking at the audience as opposed to with the audience. Now today, with today's generation, people are very savvy, and you know, they don't go for scripted presentations anymore. If you're today's presenter, I talk about 4 techniques or 4 aspects of a model that I use in both of my books and also in my training. And those aspects are creativity, strategy, technology, and psychology. So with all the fantastic technology out there, with video and 3D animations, and now you've got virtual reality and augmented reality, people expect a lot more than death by bullets, Bill. And also, as you mentioned before, very importantly, people want to be entertained, believe it or not. I mean, take a look at it. People's attention span today is like a ferret on a double espresso. And you really can't spend a lot of time going through some boring things. You've got to get right to the heart of the matter. You've got to say it in a very interesting, amicable way, and you've got to engage that audience. So you've got to be with that audience. You've got to connect with them, whether it's with eye contact, asking questions, and so forth. So I would say entertainment is a big part of it. Using the right visuals is a big part of it. Being much more conversational and informal is really key.
To me, something you pointed out there is also central to success for a presenter, and that is engaging the audience. Audiences today do not want lecture. In fact, when I'm addressing a group, either in a keynote speech or a seminar, the very first thing I say to the group is that lecture is one of the greatest cures for insomnia that was ever created. And if you try to lecture to an audience today, and as you put it so well, if you speak at the audience, you will lose them. So engaging the audience, whereas at one point, great presentations could be monologue, now dialogue is vital, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I gave a 2-hour executive presentation to a group of senior HR managers at a major health organization here in Houston. And unfortunately, I was scheduled to give it at 1 p.m. after they had a large buffet. And so we know blood sugar is going to kick in. And, you know, if you give them a death by bullet PowerPoint and you lecture them, as you said, it's a killer. And so what I did was I asked them questions. I actually played around with the audience. I used a lot of photos and videos in my presentations. And I asked them challenging questions that made them look good when they came up with the answers. And it worked out beautifully. It works out beautifully for any presenter.
One approach that I found helpful when you know a month or so ahead of time that you're going to be addressing an audience, and I learned this from other professional speakers years ago, one of the very good steps that you can take is to ask the chairman or the president of the organization to give you the names, the email addresses, and the telephone numbers of 3 or 4 of the leaders that you can have conversation with ahead of time. Some of them prefer to talk by telephone, some of them prefer to answer your questions by email, but at any rate, when you get to the presentation, you've got 4 or 5 people who've already been engaged. And when you call for discussion questions, you can be sure that these people probably will be among the first to talk. And when the leaders talk, as you and I know, others talk as well. So this situation of creating dialogue doesn't just have to start when you get there. You can make it happen ahead of time, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, as you know, Bill, most keynote speakers send out an audience questionnaire form where they ask questions like, what is the purpose of this conference or presentation? How many people are attending? What are their roles and responsibilities? What do you think are their priority needs? And you're absolutely right. Calling somebody up ahead of time, if you can, gives you great insight into, generally speaking, what a diverse group of people might need and want. Now, in the event, you can't do that for some reason, either because they don't want you to do that or because you don't have time or for some other situation. When you begin your presentation, you could ask a couple of simple questions to identify perhaps what some of their needs and goals are right from the very start. And that in itself would get them to appreciate you and the fact that you're interested in finding out what's important to them.
I remember, Ray, one of the times that I was attending the National Speakers Association's convention, one of the presenters at one of the seminars was talking about the very point you're making. And this presenter said that she had heard a speaker recently say to an audience, when after the speaker had been introduced, "What is it you people are all about anyway?" What is it you do? What are your interests? Today, in the age of the internet, when companies are, even many of them, posting their annual report on their website for all of us to see, and their officers, you can contact them. I mean, there's no excuse, there's no reason. It is just impossible to connect with an audience if you let them know to begin with that you have no idea who they are and what they are about.
Oh, absolutely, Bill. And you know, even though I focus heavily in a lot of my industries on presentation skills, I also focus heavily on listening. And a lot of presenters don't realize that it's important to listen to the feedback that an audience is giving you.
Would this be a good time for me to say, what was it you just said?
Absolutely.
Yes, so, the best presenters are those who are attuned to what people are thinking, what their problems are, what they need, what will interest them, what they need to know, all of those things.
Oh, absolutely, Bill. And you know, you had mentioned something a while back about engaging an audience. There are, believe it or not, some very passive ways, as you know, of engaging the audience and getting them to think and feel about something. You can't do it with bullets. You know, I ask people, you know, with the death by bullet PowerPoint today, do you dream in bullets? And I don't know too many people who have dreams with bullets. And it's about visuals, but also, as you know, Bill, and you've taught your clients, stories, compelling, irresistible, interesting, captivating stories are 10 times more effective than death by bullets. When I give a presentation about creativity, for example, to a group of business people or technical people, I actually show a story including photos of me stuck on my roof over here in the summer on August in the woodlands when it's about 94 degrees. And I was stuck on my roof for 4 hours because I impulsively got on a small step ladder, got up there to get pine needles off the roof, and I couldn't get off the roof with the step ladder. But the funny thing was, I have a window directly over my garage that was open that I didn't see. And the concept behind that is I talked about mindlessness, that a lot of times with creativity, we don't think of different options available. So what happened was when I tell this story, people invariably, months or years later, will come back to me and say, you know, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but you're the fellow who was on the roof. And people remember those vivid, entertaining, interesting, captivating stories. So what I try to do is I try to tell people, even when you're telling a story, you can include facts, you can include statistics, you can include metaphors. So it's not as if it's a soft communication tool. It's a very, very powerful, hard communication tool.
Most interesting that one of my recent guests is a professional storyteller. We talked about that, about the power of stories. And we mentioned that when we are infants, are just barely beyond that, some of the first words we ever hear are once upon a time. we are fascinated as children by stories, and we don't ever get over that. So getting back again to how audiences have changed, there may have been a time when people would listen to a lot of statistics, but I love the title of another book that I reviewed for Amazon one time, and the title was "Wake Me Up When the Statistics Are Over." And boy, can I relate to your story about being stuck on that roof, because I remember one very hot summer, and they were all hot when I lived in Columbia, South Carolina, one of the hottest places in the South temperature-wise. I was on my roof, which I've never done again. I was, I suppose, cleaning off straw, and I made the mistake of forgetting how hot a roof would get, and I was wearing shorts.
That's what I was doing.
Yes, and that was a long 4 hours for you, I'm sure. Getting back to how people remember stories, one of my favorite keynote motivational speeches that I've given over the years is entitled, "Always Push the Up Button." And there's a story behind that. A year or so ago, my wife and I, for many years, have attended University of Georgia football games. I taught at University of Georgia. It's only 45 miles to the stadium. And one day last year, we were walking through this massive crowd of spectators. A guy walked past me going the opposite direction in that corridor, didn't say my name. All he said was, "Always push the up button."
Wow.
And who knows, he may not have remembered a lot else that I said that day, but because he remembered that key story, I'm sure that he picked something up from the presentation. You know, one of the phrases, and there are many of yours that I like, but one of them I like is you say that you help professional people create a more charismatic professional presence. And this reminds me, and I've never done it, but it reminds me of improv theater, where a friend of mine who had been through that said that it had been helpful to him in his speaking because of the emphasis on being in the moment. Now, so many speakers you feel are not in the moment. We go back to that script time. They've got something before them. or they've got something memorized. It's canned. You and I don't believe in canned. We believe in planned, but not canned.
Oh, absolutely. You know, one thing I do on YouTube, there's a excerpt of a presentation I gave to a large Chamber of Commerce group called Supercharging Innovation. What I typically do, Bill, is if I'm giving that type of presentation with a lot of stories, a lot of examples, what I have a tendency to do is to memorize the key facts about the stories or the anecdotes or the statistics. But I never memorize the presentation. But what I do is I take those memorized elements and I turn them into a conversational situation with the audience. Now, that's not always easy for people to do and to memorize stuff. And if you saw my excerpt called Supercharging Innovation, you'll look at it and say, that took a lot of time to memorize, and it did, but it was worth it. The other thing I wanted to mention, Bill, in addition to stories, is the use of video. For the folks watching this, I would encourage them to go to YouTube and to see the climactic ending of one of the best movies about business I've ever seen. And it was actually produced in 1954, starring William Holden, Frederick March, Barbara Stanwyck, Walter Pidgeon, all major stars back then. And it's about an 8-minute climactic ending of a presentation in a boardroom that you will never forget. And you mentioned charisma. You're going to see charisma. You're going to see presence. You're going to see psychology. It's a wonderful video that I show audiences. So instead of my necessarily telling them a story, I supplement it with videos that let people see and feel what's actually happening. So videos could be a key part of your training or your presentations or your speeches.
Video reflects our generation because reading, yes, reading is still in, but people want podcasts. They want to hear it and they want to see it. If you do all of your training, all of your teaching without including video, you will not reach today's audience. Now, one of the points that I definitely want you to share with us, you talk about the 5 C's of game-changing presentations. Unfortunately, time is rushing along, so we'll have to give a quick overview of those. But what in your presentation coaching training, what are the 5 C's of game-changing presentations?
Well, if you have a presentation that has these, you've got to be an incredible presenter. And those are a presentation that is clear, understandable, concise, as much as you can make it, convincing or persuasive, captivating, and finally compelling. Now, there's a difference between captivating and compelling. Typically, compelling means that you're presenting information that is literally irresistible. It's incredibly powerful. Now, captivating is your delivery style. You're being sincere, you're being charismatic, you're having great stage presence, you've got great rapport with the audience, you're being expressive, you're being enthusiastic, those types of things. So let me summarize again. Be clear, concise, convincing, captivating, and compelling.
That is a formula which will not fail. And there are many presenters who might have 2 or 3 of those, but when you find a presenter who brings all 5 of those to the audience, there are 3 things that will happen. First of all, they will say, I learned something. Secondly, they will say, that's enjoyable. And third, they will say, my, the time really flew by. Wouldn't those be the 3 things that we want every audience to say when we address them or someone else addresses them?
Absolutely, Bill. You summarized that beautifully. You bet.
Bray, I know that many of our listeners and viewers, and this, I should mention, is not only video, but it's on podcast as well. And now that I brought us both back to the screen, I'm going to ask you if you will give us your contact information and mention a book of yours if you'd like. We know that many people want more information about you.
Okay, let me just again kind of flash up my book, Innovative Presentations for Dummies. This is a rather unique and extraordinary book that not only covers all the essentials of speaking, but focuses on my model of creativity, strategy, technology, and psychology. To contact me, you could reach me at innovator@comcast.net, but it's spelled differently. It's spelled INNOVADER, like an innovation Darth Vader. Innovator@comcast, COMCAST.net. Or go to my website, www.anthonyinnovationgroup.com.
Ray, thank you for that. A couple of your quotes, and there are many that I would love to share with the audience, but before I go, I have to share these. Opportunities are out there waiting to be grabbed. Thank God they are. And then I love also where you say, possibilities are endless if you know how to grab them. The positive, affirmative approach I embrace totally. I also like where it says that you help people move from mild innovation to wild innovation. Gosh, you're a quotable guy, and it's all worthwhile. Ray Anthony, thanks so much for being our guest today.
Thank you, Bill. You are truly one of the great masters of communication, and I so appreciate your having to interview me today.
Thank you. And now that you've given your contact information, I will share mine, the Biz Communication Guy. And so my website is bizcommunicationguy.com. Invite you to go there, review my services, sign up for my free, everybody's favorite word, my free newsletter. And also you can subscribe to the Biz Communication Show, both the video portion and the podcast portion as well. Thanks very much to those of you who have joined Ray Anthony and me today on our video interview and our podcast interview. And again, I want Ray Anthony to know once more how grateful we are. And I truly encourage every one of you to get familiar with this great man's works. Thank you, Ray Anthony.
My pleasure, Bill.